the end of the month, which means it's time for a reading wrap up. I had a really good month this month. I didn't DNF anything. I was in a good groove, and I was able to get through 6 books. 3 of them were audiobooks, 2 were physical books, and 1 was a graphic novel, which is always fun. I usually have 3 books going at a given time. I have my commute audiobook, and then I have my on the bus physical book, and then I have my before bed light reading book. So this is I'm able to get through not that many. I know there's some people who are like 12 books in a month, and I'm like, how do you do that? But I'm pretty impressed. 6 books for me is a pretty good month. So let's get into it. So first off, I read The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin. This is book 2 of her duology, her Great Cities duology that starts with The City We Became. And I really enjoyed this one. It's obvious that this, and she says this in the end notes, this was going to be a trilogy. And with COVID and everything happening, it kind of just ended up being a duology instead, which is fine. I think a trilogy would have been a bit more of a slog, and this kind of kept things light and fun and interesting, and I was genuinely impressed with how it wrapped everything up, and gave some really great character arc resolutions, which I really enjoyed. So I did enjoy this one. Big fan. Next up, I read... Okay, so I'm doing a reread of all of Anne Rice's books, her Vampire and Witch series, because they kind of link together. And so this month I went through Blood and Gold and Merrick. And these books they're fun, and there's a lot of stuff in them that hasn't really aged super well, but it takes me back to when I was a melodramatic, angsty teenager, and so they are kind of fun. So I enjoyed Merrick a whole lot more. I thought this had a really solid story, great atmosphere, and it really worked well. This one, it felt a little indulgent. I don't really like Marius as a character, and the plot, since it syncs up with the plot of so many of the other books in the series, there's lots of rehashing of scenes, and there's not really enough about Marius's perspective that kind of adds anything important. So I don't know. It was fine, but it wasn't my favorite. But I did genuinely like this one. Next up, I read the Dark Empire trilogy graphic novel. This is a Star Wars graphic novel. It's one of the older ones, kind of right at the beginning of when they were starting to craft sort of the extended universe, or expanded universe that followed on from the end of what was then the last movie. And there was a lot of stuff in here that I liked. I think the artwork is really interesting. It has kind of a watercolor sort of look to it, which I thought was really cool. The plot was fine. There was obviously a lot of stuff in there that was used later in other things, I think sometimes more effectively, sometimes not. But it was also really interesting to see sort of the characters. This was early 90s. It was before the prequels. And sort of how the audience reacted to some of the characters. I really liked, for example, the portrayal of Boba Fett. He showed up, and he wasn't really that interesting a character in terms of he didn't have a lot of depth. He was just sort of there to be like a mini boss to be defeated, and he was a little one-dimensional. So it was kind of clear at that point everyone liked his look, but they weren't as invested in him as a character yet. So that was sort of interesting. Overall, I think it was fun. There was a lot of it that had obviously sowed the seeds for some later things in the Star Wars universe, things like the Knights of the Old Republic video games, which I thought was really cool. But it was fine. I think overall I was a little disappointed. It wasn't as huge and massive as I thought it would be, and the ending was very abrupt, but overall it was fun in a escapist sort of way, just sort of a read, let your brain unhinge itself, and just enjoy it. After that, I read, well, not after, but at the same time, I read Crown of Swords, the 7th book in the Wheel of Time series. I'm going through these kind of in a mix of audiobook and physical book. If I can, I'll read the physical, and then I'll switch to audio if there's kind of a long stretch where I know I won't be able to read it, because I want to kind of keep up with it. And this was good. I felt like the beginning was a little meandery, but it had a satisfying ending, and there were some good character arcs, so I did enjoy that one. And then finally, I read Babel by R.F. Kuang. If you want the full review, you can see the link here. This was a really enjoyable read. Looking back at it, you know when you first finish a book and you're kind of giddy, and you make kind of a glowing review. This one, looking back at it, I do feel like I think the pacing ultimately was a little wobbly in the second half. When you're reading it, I did genuinely like how the pace kind of ramps up really fast, but I did feel like looking back at it, it made the ending have a little less punch, because I felt like, just thinking back on my experience of reading it, I enjoyed the story, but I wish there had been a little more at the very end to kind of give it a little more weight, a little more emotional punch. The first time I read it, I raced to the end and I was like, oh my God, that was so good. But reflecting on it a little bit and being a little more critical, the book overall is still really well done. I did enjoy it. It's really well crafted. I like the characters. I like the vibe, everything. But I do feel like it could either have been a little bit longer, or had sort of started its end game a little bit sooner. I don't know quite which would have worked better. I'm not really a writer. But that it's interesting how your opinions of books sort of change after you've had some time to sort of sit with it and think about sort of how it affected you. So I still really like this. This is probably my favorite book of the bunch that I've read. But there's always room for critical thinking, and to kind of, be aware of that. Because I know there's some people who may not enjoy that kind of like huge explosive ending that much, because the first half of the book is a little quieter. So that's something to be aware of. But overall, this was a great month. I'm looking forward to next month. I'm continuing with my Wheel of Time and the Anne Rice series. Both of those I'm going through either in an audiobook or partially an audiobook, so I'm able to get through them faster. So it seems like I'm just reading nothing but those. The physical books I am reading a little bit slower, so it takes me a little longer to get through them. I don't have as much time. But I'm currently reading the third book in Fonda Lee's Green Bone Saga, Jade Legacy, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I can't wait to review that whole series. That's going to be another video down the road. I also want to read, I've been wanting to read some Amy Tan. I love her stuff, but I've only read, I think, 2 of her books, so I wanted to kind of expand on that. I have a bunch of her books that I've been kind of collecting over time, but I'm kind of in the mood to read something of hers, so that'll be good. And I do have another book by Toni Morrison that I have yet to read. I have 4 of her books, and I've read 3. That's Song of Solomon. So I do want to read that this upcoming month. So we'll see. I'm kind of a mood reader, and I'm all over the place, so I try not to, set up like a TBR that's really strict. But, we'll see how it goes. I feel like this upcoming month I want to focus more on less fantasy and a little more grounded stuff, maybe some magical realism, and just kind of see what that does to my brain. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But thanks for watching, and I will be back on Monday with my actual video. This is sort of an impromptu video that I threw together because it's the end of the month. So I'll see you in a couple days. Bye.